Police Officer Marcus Beto. And Police Officer Cody Good.
Members of the board, chief, ladies and gentlemen, on November the 14th of 2020, about 9:30 in the morning, these officers responded to a check the welfare regarding a male and female that were trapped in rising floodwaters. They responded, found the female unresponsive. She's suffering from hypothermia. The officers were the first officers on scene. The rising waters were about chest deep. This is November. They coordinated with each other. Some of these guys had to get pretty wet that day. They went in and saved this female's life, who was suffering severely from hypothermia. With this coordination, they also realized that the ambulance that responded was kind of on the other side of the creek area where this rising floodwater was. They immediately put this female in the car and drove her to Mercy Hospital and saved her life. So the award is well deserved to these officers.
Next up, we have Police Officer Alex Ghost. Gentlemen, before you guys have any family that you want to introduce? Right.
This is Officer Gels from Precinct. Officer Gels on October 7th, 2020 responded to an accidental injury, a 911 call. Upon arrival, he noticed a male subject was bleeding from the head and unresponsive. Check for vitals. Had none. Officer Gels then immediately began CPR and assisted the paramedics in getting this person to the hospital. He is responsible for this person's life, so he did a great job that day and was very deserving of support also.
Alex, do you have anybody here you'd like to introduce?
Brother.
Thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. Police Officer Alana Hester. And Police Officer Monica Weston.
Members of the board, chief, ladies and gentlemen, directed to November the 19th, 2020, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Officer Watson was on a preventative business patrol and she noticed a suspicious vehicle that she was going to check out. She immediately called out and Officer Hester responded to assist her on that suspicious vehicle. What they then realized was that the person was suffering from a cardiac arrest incident. They immediately removed this female subject from the car and started CPR and arranged for MS to arrive on scene. It was later determined at the hospital without the quick action of these officers, she wouldn't have made it. So again, well-deserved dismissal.
That's it. Thanks, brother. At this time, Commissioners, I have motions to make. First up is Lieutenant Greg Flynn. Lieutenant Flynn's a 21-year veteran. He spent time in the 2nd Precinct, research and analysis, and now assigned. Yeah. Family here.
Yes, I have my wife Wendy and my son Connor, who may or may not be chewing right now.
Okay. Next up, I have Sergeant Andrew Dacey. Don't recognize you without the. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Andrew's an 11-year vet, and he's just coming from program.
Yes,
Correct?
correct. Yes, sir.
Andrew, got any family here?
Yes, I have my wife Pam back there and my 2 boys, Tyler and Gus, and then various people from my previous assignment that are my work family that I spent just as much time with them. Thanks, sir.
Congratulations. For the former employee of ours. Great. Great. Good. I just want to say that we're going to go on with the meeting now, and the meeting is going to be quite some time. So those of you that got your awards, if you wish to leave now, feel free to do so. Otherwise, you can sit here for about the next 2 hours. I think.
Yes.
That's not good.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it. That's clear, isn't it? Commissioner, up now we have wash you. Come on, guys.
After me. I state your name.
I, Josh Rachel,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
I am a citizen of the United States.
that I'm a citizen of the United States.
That I will support
I will support
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the Constitution and laws of the United States,
the state of Missouri,
the state of Missouri,
and the charter and ordinances of St. Louis,
Charter and ordinances of the St. Louis County.
that I will faithfully adhere to the regulations
I will faithfully adhere to the regulations
provided in the rules and procedures for deputization
provided by rules and procedures for deputization
as adopted by St. Louis,
as adopted by St. Louis County.
and that I will faithfully demean myself
I will faithfully demean myself
as a deputized officer
as a deputized officer
of the St. Louis County Police.
of the St. Louis County Police.
So help me God.
So help me God.
As a deputized officer for the St. Louis County, your authority is restricted to the protection of persons and property of Washington University. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Super. Appreciate it.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, next up on the agenda is budget on November 2nd. We had our committee of the whole meeting with the county council, discussed our budget with them. I think it lasted ever 40 minutes that we discussed our budget with them. They had a lot of questions about the budget. Our budget proposal at that time was round figures, $61 million, which was probably about a 2.3% increase from the year before. Most of that increase went to pay off salaries for through the CDA contract. We presented our budget. At the end of the budget, Mr. Chris Graham Howard, was the budget policy coordinator for the county council, made a presentation to the council. And basically what he said in his presentation was that most of the departments that had come forward had presented their budget, but each one of them probably talked about looking for more money, reappropriations later in the year because of the way the budget was set. What was going on was that all the departments were told that it's a zero-based budget. So we based our budget based on zero basing, which every year sends us back to the county for more money. That's what he presented to them, that all the departments that he under were doing the same thing. So what the council told us to do was to go back, resubmit our budget based on what we felt like we actually needed. So that's what Joyce did. She went back and she resubmitted the budget, and she increased our payoff amount every year for retirements. We were way over budget on that every year. Gas money, she redid that. Vehicles, she redid that. We asked for 50 new vehicles, not replacement vehicles. We asked for that in our original budget. We asked for 50 new vehicles also. So that was all submitted. And when we submitted that to, the other thing that we did, we're in negotiation with the professionals right now, and negotiations are still going on. We have not settled on anything as far as a salary for them. There are going to be salary increases for them. We didn't have an exact figure yet. So Chair Councilman Days told us to give an estimate of what we think that figure is going to be. So that's put in the budget. So pretty much what happened was that after we resubmitted everything, we asked for about another $14 million. So basically our budget now is at the amount of 100, round figure $77 million as opposed to 161 million that we originally asked for. We were told to do that. Whether we're going to get it or not, we don't know. That's what we were told to do. So she has it in her hands for their consideration. That's pretty much it. No, I don't know what you're going to see in there when they finalize.
Just has to be before the end of the year.
Yes.
Joyce, will they do line item details? Will they say yes to everything, no to everything, or will they go through and say yes to this, no to that, and other?
Well, generally, they just approve or disapprove.
That's where we are. Like I said, we pretty much did what we did. We did exactly what they told us to do. Was resubmit it based on what we actually felt like we did, and what we did was we increased it on items where we always fell short, where we always had to go back at the end of the year and ask for reappropriation. So see where we go. One other thing in reference to budget on November 29th at 10 o'clock a.m. There's a committee of the whole meeting in reference to ARPA funding discussed by the council. This is just, when I saw the announcement, it's just going to be discussion amongst them in reference to ARPA funding, what they're going to deal with it. Don't know whether they're going to ask, receive questions from the audience or whatever, but that's scheduled for 29th of November, 10 o'clock, like the county council chambers. And that's all I have for the budget.
Decisions then, or they still?
I don't know. I just think they're just going to be discussing it, what they're going to do. I don't think there's going to be a finalized decision on what they're going to do. Prime base, Sarah?
Before we move on,
Yes.
how are we doing with this year's?
I think we're on the budget. Yeah, we're doing okay, but we haven't spent everything yet, but we're not going to get back to them. But no, we have not spent all that we're been allocated for this year. Joyce, Joyce is doing a great job.
Comes to me building on Michelle's question.
Sure.
For estimate of this, how much will be in your budget?
Well, right now, we just did a quarterly report, and it looks like we're about like $500,000-$600,000 in the surplus. Of course, every pay period that changes with the overtime, and if there's any more retirement payouts, which we aren't expecting right now, but we look like we're, okay. And that includes because we added the sergeants and lieutenant above education that we didn't budget for in this year, and also the pay increases that we had not budgeted because they weren't a contract at the time of the budget last year. So we're fitting all of that in. So I think we're going to be okay.
Are there specific line items that we're coming in under?
Well, we always overspend in the overtime and in the retirement payouts. We have an increased retirement payouts of $800,000 a year for years because we can't increase. So we usually take that from a salary surplus from the vacancies we're doing, and we just kind of shuffle it around. So I think what Rita Days, what she was asking for is more specific lines, what the real cost is to budget. And instead of us, always transferring money around. So hopefully that'll pass, and that will be very helpful.
So what's the mechanism there, Chief? Once we have, assuming we have a surplus, what's the mechanism to identify how we spend that surplus?
Well, we don't. That's a turn-in. So we turn that, yeah, you give it back to the county, and we never give them back as much as they would like. They expect some money back, but we are always so tight that we don't have any surplus usually. I mean, that's nothing. $500,000 out of $160 million budget is nothing. So, but I'm sure they'll take whatever they can.
So, yeah.
There are clouds over there that actually moves.
I will pass it off to you in just now.
All right, thank you. I think I'm too far away to operate it, so can you hit the start the slideshow for me? Sorry. I think it'll work to click, but it was just really jerky trying to yeah, thank you. Morning. So this month, we're kind of still on track the same way we've been seeing the last few months. Our citizen complaint incidents have been down. Our internal investigations slightly up, but really in line with what we saw in 2019. The bulk of those tends to be destruction of the property. Vehicle accidents, mostly. They have to our use of force incidents are up this year. I haven't really looked into our use of force so far for the year to see what those are yet. I will do that at some point soon, hopefully. Our accidents are more in line with previous years now. Pursuits in line. And we're still seizing more firearms and doing more incidents in which we seize firearms in previous years. So we're still getting out there and trying to get guns, seize guns that shouldn't be on the streets. Okay, so overall, we're kind of in line for a lot of crimes. You can see our aggravated assaults with firearms in particular, those have really increased since 2016. They peaked in 2020, and we're slightly down compared to 2020. So that's a positive trend. I'm hoping that'll continue to go down next year again. But the entire nation kind of saw an increase in 2020 on aggravated assault firearms. So we're just kind of in line with the nation on that one. The other ones I'll note, burglaries still way down. They haven't come back up since the pandemic. I think a lot of that is to do with people working from home so much. Our overall larcenies are down compared to previous years. I'll talk about those a little bit more in a few slides. And then motor vehicle thefts are slightly down, but those are still really increased compared to where we were a few years in the past. Okay, so overall, we're pretty even with where we were last year. Our crimes against persons are slightly up. That's mostly due to simple assaults and assault intimidations compared to last year. We're really in line with where we were last year for property crimes, and we're up on crimes against society. That's because of the increase in self-initiated activity post lockdown.
Quick question.
Yes.
I don't want to make you flip slides.
Yes. It's oddly difficult, yes.
But if you look at your slide that says summary crime data.
Yes.
And you compare it to the NYMERS year to date.
Mhm.
Summary crime data.
Yeah,
It's like from 2020 to 2021 we went down.
Yeah, so in particular, crimes against persons on those two slides really are not comparable. In summary crime data, you would just include of these crimes, the simple assaults and the intimidation assaults aren't included. And if you look at this slide here, those make up the bulk of our crimes against persons. So there have been over 2,000 simple assaults each year, 2020 and 2021. So it just makes it really hard to compare those numbers with the summary data. And it's just because it's a different tracking method.
Like it's the lesser included.
Yeah, well, and we just didn't even include simple assaults and assault intimidations are just not even included in that whole data. It's only the aggravated assaults.
Okay.
It's just a difference of the crimes that we're actually reporting. Does that answer the question that you had? I noticed that as well. I was going to mention that. Thank you.
It's a request here. When you
Okay, great. So I was gonna. Yes. All right. Oh, dang it. Sorry. Okay, there we go. So I wanted to specifically look at the crimes against property. It's been in the media a lot lately, so I wanted to kind of let you guys know what's going on with those. So I highlighted a few rows. Our thefts from motor vehicles are increased. That's the car plugs, break-ins, things like that. And the same with our theft of motor vehicle parts and accessories. The increase in those is almost completely due to the catalytic converter thefts. Though there are other motor vehicle parts and accessories that can be stolen. The other thing that's a lot of those is license plates, license plate tabs, things like that. That counts in that category as well. But we're not really seeing the increase in those the way we are with the catalytic converters. And then motor vehicle thefts are slightly down this year. And to graphically show you, our catalytic converters have just rocketed in 2021 compared to 2020. And our motor vehicle thefts have stayed pretty even, lower in 2021 now. And then our thefts for motor vehicles a little bit higher in 2020. So I also wanted to put on a map. Unfortunately, on this screen, it's kind of blocked, but if you look at this TV, you'll be able to see that in 2020, our thefts for motor vehicles were spread a little bit more evenly throughout the county, with some pretty hot spots up in North County and the city of Jennings. In comparison, in 2021, North County is much cooler. And there's just a very large hotspot in South County, kind of around where the mall is. And you see kind of the same trend for motor vehicle thefts. Our motor vehicle thefts used to be kind of more spread out, and now they're really hitting South County particularly hard. I also just wanted to go ahead and zoom in on South County because I think it's kind of interesting to see that the theft for motor vehicles, like I said, they're really concentrated right around the mall. Apparently, there's been a lot of incidents in parking lots around there. And in comparison, the motor vehicle thefts are a little bit more spread out. There's still kind of a spot around the mall, but there's also spots further south and further north that are getting a lot of incidents. The other thing I noticed with these, oh my gosh, with these motor vehicle thefts and these thefts from motor vehicles is that in addition to South County and Acton being hit really hard, there's also been more occurring in non-residential parking lots and garages compared to 2020. So there's more occurring in non-residential areas as opposed to just being in residential areas. And that makes sense because we know that they're going and hitting a lot of cars and parking lots. That's a little bit more.
Do you identify, or is there any activity that's going on in North County that has caused the decrease in?
I'm not sure if it's something specific North County is doing or if the people who are doing these crimes have just determined that there's a lot of cars in South County and West County that are aloft or have firearms in them. I'm not sure what the reason is for the decrease in North County. I just know there is a decrease in North County. I'm sure someone from Crime Scenes Property would be able to answer that question better. They're a little more attuned to specifics. Moving on to kind of more the regular pieces again. Our Crime Scene Society, like I mentioned, those are up this year. Self-initiated activity, we have more weapon law violations and more drug violations. There wasn't really anything too fascinating to me in the directed and self-initiated calls for service. If you can see, it's pretty similar pattern to what we've been seeing. Nothing too out of the ordinary for either the self-initiated or the directed. Yeah.
So something I noticed is usually in prior presentations, you mentioned when self-initiated goes up,
Yeah.
directed go down, vice versa.
Yeah.
But there's not necessarily the same correlation.
Mhm.
The trend, at least.
Yeah.
The trend, there's not the same correlation in this chart. And I was wondering if you had looked at why. Do you think maybe it's because having issues, like manpower issues?
I would have to look into it further. I can't say why the trend isn't specifically the same this month. I did notice that it was a little bit different. I was gonna give it another month to see if it kind of straightened out or if it continued to be both lower. It's hard to say for sure other than 1 month. It's hard to say with 1 month of data. You have to kind of give it a couple of months. It could just be a fluke.
Can we get this kind of data on it? Do we have access to this kind of data on a regional or national basis?
I have access to anyone who uses our PSAP. This is just our data, obviously, but I do have access to our PSAP data, but I don't have access to the other regional PSAPs communication centers. And I haven't looked to see if there's anything nationally. I don't know if there is or not. I would have to look into that, and I certainly can.
I think it'd be interesting to know how we're trending compared to
Yeah.
how the country's trending.
So one of the difficult things about comparing calls for service at different levels is different places look at different things. So for example, our officers respond to every SIT case, but that's not the case in every jurisdiction. So SIT cases make up, usually our highest nature code. And that's just not going to necessarily be the case. So it's kind of like comparing apples and oranges because different departments respond to different things. I can certainly look into it, but I'm not sure how much we can really put on looking at that data. Like, I don't know how much we can compare ourselves to it because it's not standardized the way that crime data is.
Like, that's not gonna provide anything.
I'm not sure if it's, yeah, standardization is really important in looking at this type of stuff, which is why the FBI has standardized the crime data, but calls for service, even use for sport, use of force data isn't quite the same way standardized, if that makes sense. And then the last piece is just, as always, oh my gosh, sorry, the traffic stop reports. We're still down for the year on these. I don't have the exact figures. But I was pretty, things are looking pretty much the same as always. Our total stops versus like the percent minority in the precinct and the percent minority stops is in line in most of the precincts. Afton was a little bit higher and South County was a little bit higher than their percent minority. I have not had a chance to look into that any further, really. But we do reports on that at the end of the year, a great deal into it, and we're getting close to that time, so soon. You have a question?
I think you just teed it up. So it's the year-end data.
Yes.
Will that come in January or January board meeting? It take longer than that.
I will be able to get some of it in January, I think. The crime data will be in January, yeah.
Specifically for the December meeting. Force analysis, just
Yes.
very understanding.
Yeah, absolutely, I can. Yeah, I have a report that I've been to write on use of force for the year anyway, just to see where we stand, so that there aren't any surprises with the end of year data. So,
Great, let's see it.
yes, I will pull 2019 through 2021 because 20 is kind of good. Okay. If there's anything else that you guys would like to see at the next board meeting, please feel free to email me. I can include whatever you need at a meeting. Otherwise, I just kind of throw together what I think might interest you, and it may or may not. So,
Well, I like to know like the self-initiated calls.
yeah.
The number is so high.
I'm grabbing my notebook, so write this down.
Okay. The self-initiated calls, like they're obviously much higher, like in the Afton precinct. We can have a breakdown of the nature of those calls.
Okay, yeah, I can look into self-initiated, and I can do
I
some.
mean, if you just look at the numbers, there's a huge difference between like, say, Jennings and Afton.
Yeah,
The nature of the calls may be different.
yeah, I can look into them.
And also, I think it would be helpful with that data to know how many officers are on duty time.
That's going to be a very tricky piece for me to acquire.
Okay.
I can try, but I cannot promise that. I can definitely promise you a nature code analysis and the use of force. I will try to get the number of officers.
So just an idea, because the size of how many
Certainly,
officers
I
are
agree.
gonna be.
Yeah, I agree that it's an important piece. It's just a hard bit of data to acquire.
I think what you hear is starting to ask for is much more of the understanding of the why, not just the what.
Yeah,
And so when you hear a correlation like officers to whatever it might be, or it would be helpful for me. I won't speak for my feelings, but I'm sure I'd like to understand the correlations a lot more. So
Yeah.
how do we start to be proactive and
Yeah.
how to do a little more predictive?
which is why hearing like the type of things you want is helpful, because there are so many things you could ask why about in our numbers. And I just cannot figure out the why for every one of them. It's like, that would be over a full-time job on its own. Having some direction of what in particular we're trying to address is. Are there any other questions? Okay. That's it. Thank you.
I'm sure that you're all watching the news and what's going on with car break-ins, that. And yes, we're suffering big time from it. Some of the things that Sarah was saying, why there are fewer vehicles stolen in our county than other areas, and because we get the message out to everybody, don't leave your keys in the car, don't leave your car unlocked, don't leave the garage door inside the car. Maybe some people are taking more heed to that. Some people are being a lot more careful in other areas, based on where they live, and that might be a reason why there's fewer in North County than other places. We had a press conference last week about car break-ins. Councilman Fitch and Councilman Barton made 3 different legislations to help us with the, coming up with charges. That's what they're doing, just picking door handles, seeing what cars are open. The council process to make sure their legislation. Attorney Cox had a meeting yesterday with a bunch of guys in reference to a car thefts that we were having. I think they're going to form a task force for it, but he's going to give me a report on it later on about what they came up with. So we're pretty much trying to be on top of this. As I said last week, I don't think a lot of people have asked us, is this kind of an organized crime that one group of people are doing? I don't think it's that at all. I don't think any of the chiefs think that that's what's going on. It's some type of organized crime. I just think that it's organized in the sense that 4 of us, 5 of us get together one night and say, let's steal a car, let's go to a parking lot, let's break into some cars. You got one lot and let all of you out. You got 10 minutes to break into as many cars as you want, bag up, come back, and then we're off the scene. That's as organized as it gets. I don't think it's just one group doing all of this stuff. We've had Chuck Foster and his group worked with St. Louis City and FBI on board the past weekend. They made a big bust of some guys in the city have been trailing for quite some time. And they finally made a good bust on it. We're doing our best to get on top of this. But see, the more we talk about it, the more it happens. At night, we're doing. Boston, you're up. I'm sorry, Boston. Mr. Becker, you're up.
CB, sense. Morning, happy Thanksgiving. So on the staffing report, we of course remain at 972 authorized. We have 897 officers right now. We have 75 vacancies. Commissioner Ashworth, you asked last month what the vacancy rate is over the past 3 years. Obviously, right now it's 8.3%. Historically, it's always maintained at about 5%. We're going to get those exact figures. It's roughly 5% over the last 3 years on a vacancy rate. So Class 203 is going to graduate with 9 county officers on December 15th, the evening of our next board meeting. It'll be at Logan College, and U.S. Attorney Sailor Fleming will be the keynote speaker. Class 204 begins on January 3rd. And right now we have 20 recruits rather, and we expect to get 6 or 7 more. That class will be one of the largest in the Academy's history, including the munis and the tuition enrollment. It'll start out with 53 recruits in that class. So, and we also have an April 25th class, Class 205, that we're going to try and get as many recruits in there as possible also. And with respect to professional staffing, we have 370 authorized still, same as last time. Only 19 vacancies, so we have 351 professional staff. And as the chief mentioned, we are negotiating on the professional staff and crime lab CVAs, and the negotiations are going fairly well. I don't really know when the legislation will get across the finish line, but it was and continues to be an extraordinary effort because the professional staff is broken down into a lot of specialized groups. Colonel Sad, Captain Mundell, Jennifer Baumann from the County Counselor's Office, we all met individually with these different groups, and we've also met with the chiefs going through the contracts and so forth. Extraordinary effort put forth, and soon we'll have a counter, and we meet next Wednesday, 8 days from today, to continue the negotiations. So hopefully we can wrap it up next week. And with respect to the dispatchers, we have an academy that just started November 1st with 8 dispatchers. We're going to have 2 more dispatcher academies starting January 31 and then April 11, and hope to fill those at a capacity of about 12 to 14 dispatcher recruits. Right now we have 4 employees out with COVID. A week ago it was 0. So with respect to the folks who aren't vaccinated and following the mandate of getting tested, we're having a good success rate with that. Everybody's doing what they have to do with respect to getting tested and so forth. So we're pleased with that. Another reminder, the department supports military, veterans, and reservists. Right now, we have 11 that are either stateside or overseas detached in their reserve capacity. Those are all officers also. The numbers for October, we had 32 new police recruit applications or experienced police officer applications. We have right now 17 in the background process. Next week, we have a final review board for potential applicants. The not best qualified were 21 in the month of October. It's higher than the 32 applications because it's a rolling process. We had 32 new applications in October. The NVQs and the current backgrounds obviously exceed the 32. But those are applications that have been previously received. And then we had 8 voluntary withdrawals where people just removed themselves from the process. And for the year, we have 97 new hires. That's 28 police officers and 69 non-commissioned professional staff employees. For the police officers, the minority percentage rate is 25%. And for the professional staff, it is 36%. And then lastly, we had an initial very positive meeting with Harris Stowe in regard to getting tuition enrollment, just like Lindenwood and Maryville. And they're also interested in our cadet program and some other programs that we have. The chief, Captain Kelly, Commissioner Hassler, and I met in a Zoom meeting with them that I thought was very positive and very promising. So we're going to keep moving forward on that too. That's all I have.
I have a question, going back to the beginning when you mentioned the number of incoming recruits to the academy and the big increase. So what do you owe that to?
Well, we have
actions.
the, aggressive recruiting for one. And I don't mean just the recruiters, but like I say over and over again, we're all recruiters. So I think that's added to it. So like I said, we have 20 right now. We're hoping for 26 just from the county. The remainder are, I think, 8 open enrollment or tuition enrollment. 6 are from the Maryville and Lindenwood. 2 are just what we call standard open enrollment, where somebody's just attending the academy. They go through a brief background process, and if we have the space, we allow them to go through on an open enrollment. The rest are municipal officers. So
But I'm not clear about the open enrollment. You allow them to go through. I mean, what are they doing after that?
So typically a municipality will pick them up. Typically they are folks who have either gone through our background process or another, and they were not hired, but they still badly want to be police officers. They're willing to go and attend the academy on their own, not being employed. That's the open enrollment. That's normally a very low number, and it's only 2 this time. And typically they get picked up by a municipality toward the end of their tenure at the academy.
Of the 20 plus 6 or 7 that we expect in our next class, are any recruits from that Women's Day event?
I'm sorry, are any
Are
recruits?
any of the recruits from the Women's Day event?
I believe there's 3 from that. Yes, that was very successful. I think we also have a dispatcher applicant from that. So.
Progress there. When you were talking about the negotiations with the professional staff, you talked about next week wrapping up. I mean, you anticipate that we will conclude negotiations next Wednesday.
Well, I don't know, but Jennifer's shaking her head no, but I'm just being an optimist. You never know. We have the whole day blocked out.
Appropriate conversation for closed session.
Okay.
I'm just,
It's a question about how close we are.
yeah. And I'm just generalizing that I'm optimistic.
So thank you. Second is, we talked about updated vaccination rates. I understand, right? There were 4 associates that are talking about COVID. Did we have plans to do that? I just don't recall the conversation last week where we talked about, are we going to do another survey on how many of our officers are vaccinated?
We can, we haven't obviously done that, but to be clear, on the testing of the employees that are not vaccinated, they are filling out their electronic surveys on a weekly basis, just so that's clear. But that's certainly something we're going to revisit because we'd like to see if that number's changed at all. But generally very pleased with the low number of COVID positives. Like I said, last week, for a long time, we had 0.
Change in our forecast of openings, we're kind of generally talking about Q1 next year of what the forecasted opening, like a substantial change in that forecast.
Openings with respect to,
Our officers.
you mean the number of vacancies? We still think probably pushing 100. Thank you.
That's all I have.
Next on our agenda, approval of minutes from our October 13th.
I move that the minutes be approved.
All in favor? Minutes to be approved. Next on our agenda, letters and communications. Do we have any? Okay, no letters and communications. Do we have any old business? Hearing none, I'll move on to new business. Have several contracts for approval. I'll present them in batches. We can discuss and vote on. First is a police service agreement with the city of Normandy for coordinated communications and care services. The next is a police services agreement with the city of Benton for full police services for a term of 10 years. Next is a police services agreement with the city of Pacific for use and access of computer-assisted reported entry care. The next is a police service agreement with the city of Clayton for the assignment of 1 police officer to the St. Louis County Municipal Police Academy. And the next is a police service agreement with the city of Florissant for the assignment of 1 police officer to the St. Louis County and Municipal Police Academy. We have discussion on any of these contracts. None, may I have a motion to approve these contracts?
I move for the approval of contracts.
Second.
All in favor? These contracts shall be approved. The next is a professional service agreement with Florissant Psychological Services for a medical consultant contract to provide the St. Louis County Police Department employment psychological screening services and employee evaluation. The next is a police services agreement with Dolan Consulting Group to provide the St. Louis County Municipal Police Academy with a course titled Community Policing Training for St. Louis County Police Department Division of Patrol. Professional services agreement with Training Force USA for a new contract with the Academy to teach a program titled Investigations for Law Enforcement Officers and Investigators. Police services agreement with Training Force USA for a contract with the Academy to teach a program titled Use of Force Analysis. And a professional services agreement with Training Force USA for a new contract with the Academy for a course titled Managing Generations in the Workplace. Do you have any discussion on any of these contracts? Do you have a motion to approve these contracts?
That these contracts be approved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Contract shall be approved. The next is a professional service agreement with law enforcement seminars for a contract to provide the academy with a program titled Recruiting for Law Enforcement. Professional service agreement with law enforcement seminars for a contract to provide the academy a program entitled Internal Affairs Investigations. Professional services agreement with law enforcement seminars for a contract to provide the academy with a program titled Background Investigations for Police Applicants. Professional service agreement with Paul Meller for a contract to provide the academy a program titled You Have the Right to Remember, Memory Skills for Law Enforcement. A professional services agreement with Michael K. Fagan for a contract to provide the academy a program titled Basic Recruit Constitutional Law Training. Professional service agreement, 6-layer concepts and consulting. Provide the academy with a program titled Human Terrain Mapping and Behavior Pattern Recognition Workshop. Professional service agreement with Catherine E. Forney for a contract to provide the academy with a program titled Instructor Development, and a professional services agreement with Constance Beekman to provide the academy with a course titled Basic Recruit Nutrition Training. Have any discussion on these contracts? Hearing none, may I have a motion to approve these contracts? In favor? These contracts shall be approved. Next, we have 3 general orders for a discussion and consideration. Chief, do we have, is anybody going to present on these orders to us, or should we have the discussion?
He's new, so I can just take on one.
Thank you. Morning.
Folks. Do you want me to go in any particular order, ma'am?
You choose. Surprise us.
The one that's on top. So, General Order 61, workplace harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Policy was revised to expand and clarify protected classes, add both discrimination and retaliation throughout policy, as well as outline the clear process for employees to report that harassment. The draft that you guys have been provided also has restrictions on supervisory relationships and outlines portions of the newly enacted state statute as it relates to internal affairs investigations. Any questions regarding that order?
This might not be a question for you, so if it's outside your purview, that's okay. But something we had talked about is respect to a new procedure for hearing complaints. Jump in. It's a legal question. But there's the 60 days. There's going to be a 60-day.
On the appeal process? Yes, ma'am.
And then the unit can ask the board for additional time to continue the investigation. Is my understanding?
That's correct. So there is, so from the start of the internal affairs, the professional standards complaint for the new statute, they have 90 days. However, internal affairs can appeal to you, the board, for an additional 60 days, up to 2 times.
And just to clarify,
I would suggest the legal questions wait and not take legal advice from.
okay. I did not mean this to be legal, but it's,
That's where
if this is heading to legal. Okay.
I'm just stating what's in our policy.
Okay.
I'm just reading the
Yep,
policy.
get that. Okay.
Yes.
I actually don't think I have a legal question. We can move on. Does anybody else have questions or comments or discussion about this? Do I have a motion to approve this general order? All in favor? Okay, this order shall be approved.
And the second order is General Order number 10, evidence of property. This is basically, we had two separate general orders. We have Order 95, which is evidence of property disposition and accountability. Due to so much overlapping information, both of them, and redundancy, they were both combined. But as far as procedural changes, just about disposing of evidence, but very minor, everything was just combined to not have two separate policies and making one.
Questions on this policy?
Is there anything to do with that to it, or is it simply just a combination?
No, a few policies and procedures on, like I said, disposing of evidence. How evidence receipts are now logged into the care system. Is that?
So everything that's in bold is
Yes,
added to the policy.
yes, ma'am, but most of that would have been taken from the other policy. So you're going to see a lot of bold in that one, but it's just redundant from combining the two orders because it's such a large order.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
This general order shall be approved.
Members of the board, the final that we have to present today is General Order 25 grievance review. And revisions to this order just include the makeup of the actual committee, the steps for filing a grievance to the eligible employees. The language in here is more focused around the exact language that's in the collective bargaining. And then every employee can file a grievance, not just those.
Move that this general order be approved.
Second.
All in favor? This general order shall be approved.
And that's all I have. Well, thanks.
Moving on to the next item on our agenda is a public forum. We receive any comments for our public forum?
No, we did not.
We did not. Okay. Any other items at this point before I move on to our next? Okay. The Board of Police Commissioners may vote to go into closed meeting for legal advice and review of claims and lawsuits involving the police department, section 610-0211 RSO and section 114-0201 SLCRA. And discussion of employee and personnel matters, section 610-0213 and 13 RSMO and sections 114-0203 and 13 SLCRO. An update on union negotiations, section 610-0219 RSMO and section 114-0209 SLCRO. And discussions of requests for proposals, sections 610-0212 and section 114-0201. Do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Move that the board, or that the commission goes to the closed section.
We have a roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Ashford,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwer.
Yes. We in closed session. We are back from closed session. The board is going to hold a vote on our. Okay, can we roll call votes?
Ma'am, Commissioner Ashworth,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks.
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwer.
Yes. Thank you. We are going to hold our vote on the revised. So the only item left on our agenda is election of officers. I have a nomination for chair.
Yes. But you wanna?
I nominate Brian Ashworth for chair.
I said,
Discussion?
yeah.
Roll call vote.
Commissioner Ashworth. Commissioner Banks,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwer.
Yes. May I have a nomination for vice chair? Any discussion? We have a roll call vote.
Commissioner Ashworth.
Yes.
Commissioner Banks.
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwer.
Yes. May I have a nomination for secretary?
Banks be secretary.
Any discussion? May we have a roll call vote?
Commissioner Ashworth,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks,
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwer.
Yes. Congratulations. Any other topics or issues?
I have none.
Board members, thank you to everyone else. We'll vote on adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
We have a roll call vote on adjournment.
Commissioner Ashworth,
Yes.
Commissioner Banks.
Yes.
Commissioner Hassler,
Yes.
Commissioner Schwer.
Yes. Very much.